Welcome back to Unmasking the Trans Movement with John Euler. I'm your host, Brad Wilder. Last time on the show, Jeremy stopped in with Dr. Ann, and they had a great talk about intersex. What is intersex? What does it entail? How they get there? How this is created, the science behind it. You've heard about men having babies? Well, some of that science comes from intersex, and we're going to discuss that again today with part 2. Let's bring in John Euler, our expert here, who has more than enough qualifications and knowledge to help us get through this all and bring a little perspective into what intersex is all about. John?
Brad, thank you. And I'm an expert in a number of different things, how to keep men and women safe from predators. And I'm a trauma therapist. And Dr. Ann Gillies is with us. She is a trauma therapist, a specialist as well in trauma therapy. And so our hearts go out to those that are in distress, and intersex condition can be something that brings about stress. But as we learned last time from our guest, Jeremy Williamson, that the numbers are very different than what we are being told by the pushers of the trans deception. The reality is this, and Ann, I'll let you introduce Jeremy, but what's so important, and I recommend people go back and listen to the first part to learn some of the science, which is the likelihood of any of us meeting an actual intersex individual with that condition is almost nil going through our lives.
That's right, John. Welcome, Jeremy. I was just going to add something to what John said. I had talked to a local doctor who's a good friend of mine a few years ago, and just asked her a little bit, about intersex. And she said she had never seen an intersex baby herself. She had never delivered one, nor had she seen one in her hospital. And now this is a more rural area, but it still covers a fair good percentage of population. It's not city. So I thought that was interesting in itself. So I think that speaks to this whole phenomenon. This is a genetic issue. It's a biological issue. And Jeremy, you have been so kind to join us. This is something that you have been diagnosed with. And I thought as we get going, you had written an article in 2022 that you wrote this article, which you kind of used the analogy of computer programming to describe the biological perspective of intersex. I thought you might be able to share that with us to begin, because I thought that would really help people understand at a very kind of basic level. Keep it basic. Us non-techno people don't get computer programming, but I got what you were saying in your paper.
Well, I appreciate that, Ann. I'm a software engineer by trade, so I see a lot of things in terms of programming and in terms of technical language. And so when I discovered that I had this intersex condition, I quickly understood what it was because of my programming background. And you have to think of it like you have two programs that are coded. One is coded in the mother and one is coded in the father. Right? So you have the egg and the sperm. And when they're brought together at conception, they begin compiling, and the programmers have to compile their code into something that is runnable on a computer. And so the baby starts to compile in the womb. And when the baby is born, then it is the program is complete and it compiled correctly. What happens with intersex is the code from either the mother or the father is missing chunks of code. One of the functions isn't there. And so when the compiler is compiling it, depending on how severe the missing chunk of code is, depends on whether the baby will compile, will complete and be born, or whether it will be a miscarriage and the child will not be able to be developed properly. And this can happen because of the differences in the programming, differences in how much information is lost or in some cases gained. It can have an effect on the life of the child, even if they do make it to birth, they might live only to be 5 years old or 10 years old. But a lot of them, once they're born, they do make it into adulthood and have relatively normal lifespans.
And let's talk about that relatively normal, because there are medical issues that go along, like other with this diagnosis, with this condition, and those medical issues. I'm hoping that you'll explain some of them to us, because they really can change kind of how you do life, right? I know for yourself, you've had some issues, and it involves the levels of testosterone, and I don't know very much about this whole thing. You are really, honestly, we feel like we have an expert on this. Having someone that's willing to talk about this live is really, really exceptional. What kind of things have you struggled with, and what kind of things do you know or are you aware of through your own research that others who have intersex conditions actually struggle with?
Well, the conditions can vary quite wildly. There's quite a spectrum, if you want to use that term. Some have allergies to testosterone. Some have allergies to estrogen. And because of those allergies, their body can attack itself, because especially like if a woman has an allergy to estrogen, it's pretty severe. It's the same with a man. And this usually ends up in having to be medicated all their lives, or premature death, actually. There's deformities in the genitalia. There's the deformities in the chest and the hips. There's a wide variety. I couldn't even really begin to discuss all of the variations. But in my personal life, I've had a very low development of testosterone. So at one point, when shortly after I discovered my condition, I was feeling very lethargic. I had extreme weakness, and I talked to my doctor, and we weren't quite sure what it was. And I said, well, I've been looking online and reading about the side effects of low testosterone. So why don't we have my testosterone tested? And it was the lowest testosterone level he had ever seen. I can't remember what it's like, nano milliliters or something like that, but it was 0.2. And the average male has at least 9 milliliters or nanoliters or whatever it is. So he told me that it was a lethally low level of testosterone, and I had to take testosterone injections in order to bring it up. And at that time, I got in touch with the only endocrinologist in my province, and he was telling me, well, if you take testosterone, you'll notice that your sperm count will go down and your testicles might shrink. So he suggested, let's take it off and see if there's some other initial cause as to why my levels were so bad. And shortly after stopping it, my levels came up to 3, and then they were up to 5, and now they hover between 7 and 8. So it's still lower than average, but it's not lethally low. And he said in all of his, because he's the only endocrinologist in my province, he said in all of his research, he's only ever seen one other instance in the world where somebody was taking testosterone and they came off of it and they were able to bring it back to those levels naturally. So he's not sure. He told me he's not sure why my levels are fluctuating like that, but he thinks that my pituitary gland had reset because of the testosterone injections, and I was only taking them for a short while. So it sent a reset signal, and so my levels are back up to being better than Vice's, the reporters at Vice. But it's still within norms for an intersex person.
With the injections, did that change and help?
Well, this is something that I've noticed with transgender individuals, because the women who are trying to become men are taking testosterone. And for me, every time I got it, I had a peak high within about 24 hours. And then I had to take them once a week. And so by the time it came around, I was really feeling very lethargic and quite terrible. And so I was actually happy to stop taking them, because I was going through these ups and downs, and it was ups and downs in my emotions, ups and downs in reactions. It was like being a teenager again. And I've used this example when speaking to women who are taking the injections is they didn't go through puberty as males. And so they're not, they talk about toxic masculinity. Well, when you're not a man and you're taking testosterone, you don't know how to react to the aggressive tendencies and the emotional mood swings of it in your body. Whereas I went through puberty, it was a little bit different, not too different from other people. And I learned how to handle my higher testosterone, how to talk to people. But women, typically they have very violent mood swings after they've taken testosterone.
That's something that I have shared as well, that these young girls going on testosterone, I mean, become very angry, like in the family system. Oh my goodness, their families are just put through the ringer, because not only are they these children and adolescents in this state of mental confusion, then they pump themselves. Well, they don't. The doctors pump testosterone into this already confused young woman. And exactly what you're saying, Jeremy, that of course they don't know how to handle the aggression that testosterone brings, because they're not supposed to be pumped full of it. I mean, there's a little bit in our bodies, like we all have, some different hormones, but these transgender or cross-sex identifying individuals are just they're really out of control in their emotions, and the primary emotion is anger, great anger, and usually toward their parents. Of course, you see it in everything that becomes the trans, because they are lashing out against anyone that would have any kind of, any other kind of ideas that perhaps they really aren't in the wrong body. So you get this incredible anger that you see in society happening.
And let me, I want to second. I just listened to a personal story, on YouTube. You've got these young kids, unfortunately, or by that time, young adults, who have gone through this. We call them detransitioners. There's, I think on Reddit, there's like 45,000. I forget, maybe more. Right, because kids are now realizing they've been lied to, they've been deceived. Right. And it was very powerful to hear her story. She said that she wound up in the emergency room 3 times in 1 week. She started taking testosterone, and she said her emotions were off the chart. Not only are the physical issues, voice deepening, you got body hair, but she said she was just erratic, and she made erratic decisions, including libido. She said her libido was through the roof. Now, she did not go into details, but she said she really made some very foolish decisions under the influence. This is a controlled substance.
Yeah.
And it's experimental. Oh, here's something else, guys. You may not be aware of this, but just this last week, Norway is pushing to have this in a new piece of legislation, that puberty blockers are and hormone therapy. I don't think, maybe that's not included there. But anyways, the puberty blockers for sure are to be deemed experimental. Hello, after these years of pushing this on children, now they're going to say, well, really, it was just an experiment. We knew that all the way along, right? Yeah. Anyways, there's my little bit of uproar today. But back to you, Jeremy.
Well, yeah, as far as my life, it's just been the testosterone levels have been going wild. I've experienced weight gain. I still have a significant amount of acne as a result of this issue, and but on a deeper level, uh, we experienced, my wife and I have experienced 3 miscarriages, and we're not sure whether my condition has played a factor into that. Um, my wife also has some her own issues, but um, we think it's highly probable. Um, we can't really prove it. There's no way of proving it because you don't get a test on a miscarriage to see whether it was because of a intersex condition or not. Um, but those have been. I mean, I have a relatively minor uh, defect, and that's the level of medical conditions that I've experienced. There are people out there who go their almost their entire lives thinking that they're female, and then finding out when they were unable to conceive a child, oh wait, I'm actually a man. I just uh, had an extra X chromosome when I was born. So it's you can have a serious psychological ramifications with people with intersex, and I think that those people should have all of the support they need.
Absolutely.
But they need to be told the truth, and they need to be told that their condition is very rare, and there isn't anything that we can do to fix your body to what it was supposed to be because the programming just isn't there. But we can help you to either continue life as a woman, or we can help you to transition into what you genetically are. So I just think that there should be more, people should be more focused on helping intersex people rather than using them to beat society into complying with their ideas of what an intersex person should be concerned with.
Well, yes, and let's clarify that intersex is not part of the trans umbrella, or I mean, the trans agenda has tried to use it as a way to promote the need for these young people having all kinds of drugs and hormones lifelong, right? And yet for these individuals, this small percentage, and as you were talking, I was thinking earlier in the last segment, you had mentioned that the percentage of intersex individuals was between 0.003 and 0.3%. And I'm thinking, as you're talking about that the ones who are at that furthest end, the 0.003, are probably the ones who have the most severe conditions. And then that there are quite a few more individuals in the population that have a less severe, like yourself. You still have some certainly biological, some genetic issues with and health issues that correspond with this. But you were also saying something earlier about there's no male born that looks like a female and presents as a female. So this is not trans, is not cross-sex identity. This is an actual biological issue, that there's no male born that presents and looks like a female that actually has ovaries. And so you have this, it's very concerning. My heart, as you're talking about this one issue earlier, finding out that you actually are male. And I was wondering if you wanted to talk a little bit, and there's 2 questions here, Jeremy, I'm probably going to confuse you. How do you find out? How do you find out? Like, what are the tests? And then talk about these males that do not have ovaries. Can you kind of expand?
Well, there's different tests, and usually, for instance, when I was born, they didn't check my karyotype. They saw the way I presented, and I was like, okay, there's something a little bit off here. but clearly he had a Y chromosome. So they just tested to make sure that I would be able to have kids, that I would be able to use the bathroom properly and all that stuff. So those tests come as an immediate reaction when you're born and say, okay, this is an atypical baby. So let's find out what the extent of the deformity is.
Right.
And then there's other ones which can go their whole life and present no symptoms. So they don't know that they have the condition. But then when they try to conceive a child, if they go to a fertility clinic, which happened in one instance, a man was born with the complete appearance of a woman, of a baby girl. And as he grew up, he lived as a woman. He understood that he was a woman, and he even married. And they attempted to have a child, and they were unable to conceive. And so they went to the doctor to find out why they couldn't conceive. And that was when they discovered that he had no ovaries. So therefore he was a male. And in fact, he had undeveloped testicles. So they ended up ultimately conceiving a child through artificial insemination. And the child was not the man's child genetically in any way, because when your testicles don't develop, you can't produce sperm, so you can't have your own children. So the psychological issues, I can't imagine the trauma that this person would go through, discovering that they're actually a man, discovering that they can't have kids, and discovering that they'll never be able to have their own kids. It just I would expect that they would have a lot of therapy.
Well, just thinking about that, and John, you might want to have some things to say, I think, here too. Like from the perspective of psychology, here you have a woman in all effects and purposes, right? Looks like a woman, acts like a woman, obviously had enough estrogen to actually function as a female, as a woman. And then finds out through some kind of testing that, well, found out they didn't have an ovary, or didn't have ovaries, which is a huge thing, but they did have a uterus. So then they find out that they just did not develop. And then on top of that, found out that they actually had underdeveloped testicles. I mean, it just blows my mind. So not only for her, but also for her spouse, this man who what do I do now? It's like, wow. I mean, that would just be the ultimate shock, I think, for both of them. And fortunately, and see, I see this as a good thing. Fortunately, medical science allowed them to have a child together. And that to me is, I mean, it's good for them. The reality is, I think about this person and think, how is his body, her body, balancing the hormones that are in there, the estrogen and the testosterone? I mean, it's incredible to me to even begin to think about that. That's too much for this program. I'm not a medical doctor. Go ahead, John.
I think that was, it raises a lot of concerns. First of all, our hearts go out to people that have rare conditions. Yes. I mean, if I was counseling that couple, I'll tell you what I would tell them. I would say, you know what, don't worry about what the doctors told you. As far as, okay, if you can carry a child, that's wonderful. That's why they originally sought out care. But the psychological impact, what I would do is, my suggestion to them is, you know what, pretend you never heard figure out how to carry the child. But other than that, don't even worry about it, right? You were fine before you found out this medical information. Don't worry about it. But really what's also jumping out at me for our discussion, and how the grand deceivers that are pushing this scheme, this ruse, the trans movement, kids are harmed. Kids are being harmed by this. Normal kids who are gender confused, typically because they've either been groomed. Well, of course they've been groomed in one way or another. And so you have a couple of different populations that are being exploited or harmed. One is those that actually have a legitimate, real issue are being used then as sort of a prop almost. So it's very disrespectful to people that actually have this condition. And then to suggest to kids that they toy with, through the doctor's assistance, their endocrine system is horrific. And I mean, as you're describing how much you went through and the difficulties in adjusting testosterone, and your mood is all over the place, adolescence is a horrific situation for both boys and girls, males and females. So we have a hard enough time going through that, and society doesn't help. So these poor kids, social media and all that. Then to think that we're going to pump them full of cross-sex hormones, the opposite hormones of what their bodies want, and we think anything good is going to come from that, other than allowing them to be pharmaceutical consumers for life. So big pharma benefits from this. The doctors get rich off it. Some people said, no, they don't get rich. Well, I don't see them performing anything for free. So right? I don't see them donating all their services. And so nothing is helpful about artificially pumping chemicals into a kid's body. Jeremy, as you said, you got pulled into this because you found that you were having, or you were hearing the term intersex, so you were sort of pulled into this. As we're starting to come down to the end of this program, what would you say to parents? What would you say to kids? Because if anybody could speak to the issue of intersex, you can speak to that issue. So talk to us about those things now that are on your mind that you want the public and parents, grandparents, and kids to know.
Well, I would say that the first thing to parents and grandparents, if your child is having problems with their gender, unless they have an intersex condition, I would seek to find out the source of their thinking. Why are they starting to believe that they are in the wrong body, or that they have the wrong gender? Because you'll find out who their groomer is by finding out how they learned that they were the wrong gender. And if your child does have an intersex condition, just go to the doctor, tell them, look, my kid is a little bit different physically, and I'd like to know what the extent of this deformity is, and if it's going to give them any difficulties later in life, so that I can raise them with the understanding, like my parents did for me. They very calmly told me, because when I hit puberty, I was asking questions. It's like, I didn't understand certain euphemisms that other peers were using. And I asked my mom about what my condition was, and she just said, don't worry, honey, it's just vestigial, or the term there, and everything works fine. I had you checked out when you were born because we wanted to make sure, and nobody even needs to know, except for your spouse someday will obviously know. But you need to be able to know why your kid is questioning their gender, and then if they have a legitimate medical condition, you need to know what the treatments are and how it will affect their lives, and just show them love and explain to them, that this doesn't make you a bad person. This doesn't change how valuable you are to them or how valuable you are to the world. It just means that how you interact with the world will be a little bit different.
You had a great mom. I just want to applaud your mom. Good for her.
Well, Jeremy, thank you so much. You've been a tremendous guest. You've been a tremendous source of information. We go to the source here. And Dr. Ann Gillies, thank you. I was thinking as Jeremy was talking, you being a trauma specialist, that, on top of everything else, you oftentimes have other things that have caused a child to question. And so maybe, as a matter of fact, in a minute or two, what would you say to parents if they're, maybe there is that combination that is what has caused a child to say, I don't want to be a girl, I want to be a boy.
Are you talking trauma there? So
Yes,
yes, absolutely, absolutely. Well, I would say you need to check out all of the things that have happened. You know, even the child's being traumatized in the school system, but it could be even more severe than that if there is anything more severe, and that would be that child is actually being sexually violated, and is rejecting their sex because of being sexually abused. And so you need to get to the bottom of those things for sure and help your child resolve to their own biological identity. That is the very best thing they can do.
Brad, this has been an intensive program, intensive episode. I'm so appreciative of Jeremy and, of course, Dr. Ann Gillies.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you to all of our guests today, John, as well. You bring this to the forefront, and that's exactly what we need, Dr. Ann and John. And Jeremy, your life experience is something that we all now understand a whole lot better in terms of not only what you've gone through, but what others are going through too. And that, you know, like John has said all the way through this program and all the way through every episode, we're not against the trans movement. We're not against intersex people. We're not against anything like that at all. We're here to help. And that help is here from people like you, Jeremy. So thank you very much for all your time, your dedication, and delivering this message, because a lot of intersex people who are in that position don't necessarily even want to communicate this message. So for you to do that for us is outstanding, and I thank you very much for that, because you've opened my eyes, and you've opened now a lot more eyes to what intersexuality and intersex is all about. Thank you very much to all of you. This is Unmasking the Trans Movement with John Euler. I'm your host, Brad Wilder. Please don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and you can always find all the videos at our website, which is unmaskingthetransmovement.com, or as well on BitChute. Thank you very much for being here, everyone. We'll see you again real soon. Take care. Remember, this is not our kids' fight. This is our fight.